Hi there, Nick Dutch back on the camera again one more time. Hi there, how's it going? This is my perpetual task of trying to get myself some good bread. Obviously, some of you people out there know, some of you don't, but some of you do know. I've recently gone gluten-free, sugar-free, yeast-free, and dairy-free. And if you're trying to make a bread which has basically got no gluten, or wheat, or sugar, or dairy, or yeast, then it's really rather hard. But this is a recipe I've come up with, which you can give a go if you want. If you'd like to have some form of bread which is really rather dense, but still tastes okay. One of the problems is I'm using sorghum flour in this particular case. Now, sorghum flour is highly nutritious in terms of zinc, magnesium, protein, calcium, and something else which is also good for you. Iron, that's it. So essentially it's a good thing to use, but on the other hand it's also a traditional flour used to make chapatis. So if you want your loaf of bread to taste just like something from an Indian restaurant, then sorghum is obviously the way to go. The web pages out there say that sorghum is very mild, but basically it isn't. It's still got that tang of like Indian restaurant bread. So at least bear that in mind. I'm just going to give you the recipe of what I've discovered for the moment. Okay. Remember, I got myself some good measuring units recently. I got myself cup measures, I've got myself spoon measures, so I can get the accurate, precise, and try and get as scientific as possible type measurements with the whole thing. I'll tell you what I've done, and I'll explain some of the changes that I think would be good to make. 2 cups sorghum flour, spelled S-O-R-G-H-U-M. 1 cup potato flour, which is not potato starch, because apparently potato starch comes from the potato flour comes from the skin of the potato. Learn a new thing every day. Well, at least that's what I've found out recently. I could be wrong, the web pages could be wrong, and so on and so forth, but this is just the information I'm giving you so far. Also 1 cup of graham flour, because graham flour is occasionally used as a binder and as an egg replacer in some recipes, so that's why I thought I'd include it. 1 teaspoonful of salt. I think you need to use less than that. I think you need to use like about half or a quarter of a teaspoon of salt, because essentially it was a very salty bread. Never mind. Half teaspoon of cream of tartar, 1/4 teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda. Now those 2 ingredients of course make up 3/4 of a teaspoon, because 1 whole teaspoonful of baking powder is made up of a 1/4 teaspoonful of bicarbonate of soda and half a teaspoonful of cream of tartar, and the final 1/4 teaspoon is made up of something like corn flour or some other form of flour to separate the 2 ingredients and to keep the moisture away from the 2 to stop them from reacting when they're in the container in storage. Plus a half tablespoon of lemon juice. Okay, so you got your dry ingredients, you got your lemon juice, and the rest of it, the water which you use to blend it all with, I use fizzy water, so that's carbonated water that you can buy in the supermarket, maybe a 2-litre bottle for about 50 pence. Okay, and just mix all of the dry ingredients together very, very, very well. You don't want it patchy or anything, just mix it all together very, very, very well. Add the lemon juice in a well in the middle, so basically you make a little indentation in your flour, you pour the lemon juice into that, and then you can start to mix that up, and you pour the fizzy water in bit by bit until you get yourself what I've called here a batter. So it's not a dough, it's not a dough which you can mold, it's a liquid, basically a viscous liquid that's thick, creamy, and beginning to rise whilst you're mixing it. Because the addition of water will start the cream of tartar and the bicarbonate of soda reacting, and also the lemon juice will help as well. You've got extra acid in the form of the fizzy water too, and that will also be starting to create bubbles. So it's starting the raising process whilst you're actually mixing it. So at that point, you're ready to pour it straight into a baking tin. I use a 2-pound bread tin because I've got one. And it was a nice Teflon one, okay, so I don't even need to grease it or nothing. And then smooth the top down, and I place in a preheated oven at 220 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes. I would not put it in for 30 minutes. I would put it in for probably about 45 minutes, I personally think. I could be wrong, but I think it should be longer than 30 minutes. It tasted a little underdone. Now, the general impression that the bread gave was reasonably good. It was crumbly, but apparently a sorghum flour creates a crumbly bread anyway. So you got to be aware it's going to be crumbly. You can't necessarily make sandwiches out of it because it will crumble. The flavour, as I say, slightly Indian restauranty. I'm going to change the recipe yet again to try and remedy the crumbliness, and also to try and remedy the sort of Indian restauranty flavour. Yeah, you can still spread margarine on it, you can still eat it, and yeah, I guess it's nutritious. It's of course free from gluten, it's free from sugar, it's free from yeast, it's free from dairy. So basically I seem to have achieved everything that I needed to do apart from the flavour. Now, as far as cost is concerned, if I was to make a rough estimate as to how much all of the ingredients per loaf is actually is, I would say that it might work out at an approximate £1 a loaf. So if I was to have half of it during the day and I was to have half of it as my breakfast in the form of slices of bread and margarine, that could still make up a bulk of the quantity of food that I'm having in any particular day. So that can also cut down the cost of living to a certain degree. So I could, if I improve the recipe further, actually make something that could work. Now, a lot of my bread making attempts have been made with Dove's Farm bread making flour. Now, the bread making flour actually contains rice flour, potato flour, and that's potato flour, not potato starch, also tapioca and xanthan gum. Now, potato flour is used as a thickener. Tapioca is used as a strong thickener. Alright, and the xanthan gum is a very, very strong thickener, which probably explains why when I'm making a soda bread with it, I end up with the bit of the bread that's called the crumb, namely the white stuff on the inside, was actually dense and rubbery, because it was like all thickener. That's what I think, okay? Now, I've tried making some muffins using gram flour mixed 50-50 with this bread making flour, and I ended up with something that was getting there, but not quite right. It still had that kind of like doughy consistency. You can't cook that stuff, okay? You can't cook it to stop it from being dense and rubbery. It's just not possible. It just stays dense and rubbery if you've made it badly the way I have with a soda bread, not as a yeast bread, because I think that stuff is much better for yeast rather than for soda. So, what if I was to use the bread making flour as a ingredient but not as the flour? Let's say I was to take my recipe, which currently includes a grand total of 4 cups worth of flour, being a combination of various different types of flour, and instead of using 2 cups, namely half of the bulk of the flour being sorghum flour, I was to choose 1 cup of the bread making flour. Now that should hopefully include enough thickeners to try and make that kind of pseudo or fake glutinous mass, but not enough to try and turn the whole thing into a rubber ball in the middle of a crust. That might do it. That's my next level of investigation. I'm going to cut down the sea salt by about half, because I don't want to be too salty. I might add some sweeteners as well, and we'll see where we can go from there. But that's essentially the level of my experimentation so far. Hopefully eventually I'll be able to get some sandwich bread. Look forward to speaking to you again soon. Keep cool, God bless, and all that kind of jazz. See you in a while.